First up on today's list is a player that I thought was around just yesterday. Zack Cozart was a second-round draft pick for Cincinnati, but never found consistent success due to injuries hampering his playing time. That is, until his contract year in 2017. With a slim shortstop market, Zack Cozart put together a campaign for the largest bag possible. He had a career year with the Reds in 2017, batting .297 with a .385 OBP and a .548 slugging. He set career highs in home runs with 24, triples with 7, and runs scored with 80, while tying a career high with 63 RBIs in just 122 games. He led all shortstops in slugging and OPS with a healthy margin each, and with a .933 OPS, it was his first time registering an OPS above 770 in his entire career. He ranked among the overall National League leaders in slugging percentage and average versus left-handed pitchers, and he was voted to his first ever All-Star game as not only a player, but a starter. However, he played through most of the season with a quad injury, which caused him to serve 2 separate stints on the disabled list. He became a free agent after the season, like I mentioned before, and in December of that year, he signed a 3-year, $38 million contract with the Angels, which turned out pretty poorly if we're being honest. Cozart's last year in the league was 2019, and we haven't seen him since. His 2017 will definitively always be his best season, where he was top 20 in slugging and OPS, and was pretty much the definition of the best case scenario for a player in their contract year. Cozart was never really the 2017 version of himself over his career, but he turned that into a very nice 3-year deal, so good for him. Let's get to talking about another Cincinnati Red. Devin Mesoraco was a highly touted prospect for the Cincinnati Reds, being that he was a first-round draft pick in 2007. However, he had an incredibly difficult time staying on the field throughout his career, registering just 157 games played through his first 2 full seasons. In 2014, Mesoraco managed to stay on the field enough to find his groove, despite still spending time on the injured list twice that year. He'd lead all major league catchers in home runs and slugging percentage, clubbing 25 home runs with a .534 clip on the year. He'd make the NL All-Star team as a reserve for Cincinnati that year. He played only 114 games in 2014, but that would be a career high for him. Concussion issues, among other things, plagued his career, and through his next final 4 seasons, he'd play in just 179 games. He'd eventually be flipped to the New York Mets for Matt Harvey, where he'd managed to stay healthy at last, but couldn't be effective enough to stay in the bigs. He retired in 2018 at the age of 30, but you gotta wonder what could have been for Devin Mesoraco had he stayed on the field consistently. Big eye-opening stats for me in 2014 for him was his isolated power, which was 6th in MLB, and his home run and fly ball rate, which was also 6th. The dude had serious pop. He just couldn't stay healthy. Next, let's talk about a pitcher who didn't get injured much but got in his own way more than anyone I've talked about on this channel. Esteban Loaiza has had one of the most insane roller coaster careers of anyone I've ever talked about through these videos, and I'm not exaggerating. After leading the league in games started in his rookie year for the Pittsburgh Pirates, Loaiza would bounce around between Texas, Toronto, and Pittsburgh for 8 seasons, never posting a season ERA below 4. He finally became a White Sox pitcher in 2003 and absolutely blossomed out of nowhere, posting a 2.21 ERA in the first half of the season. He'd be named to the American League All-Star team, starting the game as it took place in the White Sox home stadium that year. He'd pitch to a 2.90 ERA on the season and lead the American League in strikeouts with 203. For reference, his previous career high was 137. He'd actually finish ahead of both Pedro Martinez and Tim Hudson that year in Cy Young voting, ultimately losing out to Roy Halladay, who I just did a video on. As for what he's up to now, Loaiza was arrested in February of 2018 in San Diego with over 20 kilograms of cocaine. He was charged with felony counts of possession and purchase of narcotics, and is currently serving a 3-year sentence in prison. So he's kind of had a fall from grace. But his 2003 is one of the best pitcher seasons in White Sox history, as he ranked top 10 in ERA, WHIP, fielding independent pitching, strikeout percentage, strikeout to walk ratio, and strikeouts in general. He was one of the most dominant pitchers, but his career didn't turn out exactly as planned, as he never had a season quite as dominant as this. It was never the injuries that gave Loaiza trouble. He was recognized around the league as a workhorse. It was only himself that got in his way. Let's go a little bit more recent for our next entry, and that's Eduardo Nunez. After an ultimately underwhelming tenure in pinstripes in the Bronx for the New York Yankees, as well as some lukewarm years earlier in Minnesota, nobody really had high expectations for Eduardo Nunez in 2016. But he'd shocked the masses after finding more playing time for the lowly Twins due to injuries to both Trevor Plouffe and Eduardo Escobar. The Twins went 59 and 103 that year, so even when they came back, Nunez stayed in the lineup because of his good bat. He posted a .350 batting average through the first 2 months of the season, and he'd steal 19 bases between June and July alone. This helped him earn his way out of the 100-loss ball club in 2016 via trade to the San Francisco Giants. This came after Nunez made the American League All-Star team. He was only a reserve, but this would be the only All-Star nod of his career, and well-deserved, as Nunez played hard in pretty much every game of his career. His production would stay effective in 2017 for the Giants, but they'd ultimately ultimately trade him to Boston, where he'd be an integral piece of their playoff pushes in that season and the following year in 2018. Many remember Nunez's hard-nosed play in the 2018 World Series, where he battled many injuries but managed to stay in the lineup, making fantastic plays and running rampant around the bases. Although Nunez never made it back to the All-Star game, he'd win a ring with the Red Sox in 2018, battling his demons to stay in the lineup for them through the very end of the season. A ring well deserved. And I got some brief time with him as a Met, which was pretty cool too. The next entry on today's list is someone still active in the league today. Trevor Cahill was drafted in the second round with the 66th overall pick in the 2006 draft by the Oakland Athletics. Entering the 2009 season, Cahill was ranked 11th among all prospects in MLB. Cahill's 2010 featured an ERA of 2.97, making it into the top 5 of the lowest ERA in the American League, behind the likes of Felix Hernandez, Clay Buchholz, and David Price, all three of whom considered to be best pitchers in the AL at the time. Cahill's rise to this wasn't totally shocking, but it was his fall that came after that was pretty surprising to many, as he never matched these kind of dominant numbers again, becoming mostly a contact pitcher and losing most of his strikeout stuff as his career went on. It was the dip in velocity that truly made Cahill a less effective starting pitcher, but later in his career he revived himself as a bullpen pitcher for the Cubs, and ultimately reinvented himself to work around his velocity woes. In April of the following season after 2010, he signed a 5-year extension worth $30 million, only to be flipped to Arizona in December of the same year. He's back in a starting pitcher role for the Pirates this season after some seasons coming out of the bullpen, but he will likely never again match the insane production from his sophomore season in Oak, where he was top 10 in whip, batting average against, and ground ball rates. Our first and only outfielder on today's discussion is one that you may not remember from a few years ago. Michael Saunders did not fit the profile of an all-star ahead of the 2016 season, especially after the Mariners GM cited his poor work ethic and flipped him to Toronto for J.A. Happ. Michael Saunders was battling injuries all throughout 2015 and ended up playing in just 9 games. He was at risk of getting cut from the team altogether, but in 2016 he bounced back in a monumental way. He batted .311 through his first month of the season, finished May with 9 home runs on the season, and put together a 3-homer game in June against the Orioles. He joined Joey Votto, Justin Morneau, and Larry Walker as the only Canadian players to hit 3 home runs in a game and the first to do it for a Canadian team. He won the final vote contest to earn a spot at the AL All-Star Game, reaching the pinnacle of his career. He finished the year with 24 homers and an .815 OPS for the contending Jays, batting .381 with a home run in the playoffs. But he'd only bat .178 in all of the second half and would actually only end up playing one more season in MLB, splitting time between the Toronto Blue Jays and the Philadelphia Phillies. Last up on today's list is definitely the most challenging to remember, and one that I wasn't even aware of until somebody on Twitter put me onto the suggestion. That would be Evan Meek, a relief pitcher for the Pirates in 2010. He's perhaps the most unlikely all-star of any of today's entries because he was acquired in the Rule 5 draft for the Pirates. He was quietly effective in Pittsburgh as a middle reliever in 2009, but he'd be asked to step into a bigger role come the following season and was up to the challenge. He was often asked to pick up multiple innings in relief while also filling in the closer role for the then struggling Octavio Dotel. At the time of his addition to the NL All-Star roster, Evan Meek had a 0.96 ERA, a mark that was unbeaten by any other reliever in the major leagues at the time. Meek would be hampered by injuries in ensuing seasons, resulting in a heavy decrease in his fastball velocity, and ultimately his career being cut short by a few seasons. Nowadays, he's mostly remembered for giving up Derek Jeter's final hit at Yankee Stadium, a walk-off single, but many, including myself, forgot his brief era of dominance in Pittsburgh, and it deserves to be remembered. That'll do it for today's video. If I left out any forgotten all-stars you were thinking of, make sure to leave a comment down below letting me know. As always, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell for all future notifications. That's all I got for you guys today. I'm the Jolly Olive, and I'll see you guys next time.